My name is Margaret, and faith has been my compass for as long as I can remember. It wasn't something I picked up, it was something I breathed. As a child, I didn't just believe in God, I trusted Him with everything. Sundays were more than a routine. They were sacred, filled with hymns that wrapped around my heart and a church community that felt like home. I grew up knowing tithing wasn't optional. Giving 10% of my income was my way of honoring God. I never questioned it. Even when money was tight, I gave because I believed it mattered. It was how I showed love, how I proved my trust. But somewhere along the way, it became automatic. I didn't stop to think. I gave out of habit, not reflection. I thought obedience alone was enough. Life stayed steady for a while, but then things began to slip. At first it was small. I'd misplace things, forget a name, repeat myself. I laughed it off, blamed it on age. But deep down, I knew. The forgetting wasn't normal. It was creeping. One day I looked around a familiar room and didn't know where I was. Time blurred. Conversations disappeared. I was losing pieces of myself, and no matter how tightly I tried to hold on, they kept slipping away. Then came the diagnosis: Alzheimer's. My family tried to be brave, but I saw the sadness in their eyes, the hesitation in their voices, like they were talking to a version of me they weren't sure was still there. And so I prayed, not just for healing, but for presence, for grace in the moments I still have, to remember who I am even as the world around me begins to fade. No matter how often I prayed, the days kept slipping further from my grasp. My mind felt like a maze I couldn't escape. Then, one quiet afternoon, everything changed. I was in my favorite chair by the window, sunlight brushing the room in gold. The world was soft, slow. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I wasn't there anymore. The confusion was gone, the weight, the weariness, gone. I stood in a place so radiant it felt like light was breathing. It wasn't just beautiful, it felt holy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The air itself felt sacred. Not just still, but full, like it carried peace in every breath. I looked down at my hands, expecting the frailty I'd come to know. But they were strong again, steady, whole. My body felt light, as if I'd been carrying a weight for years and had just now remembered how to let it go. Then I saw him. He didn't need to speak, and I didn't need to ask. I knew exactly who he was. Jesus. The moment our eyes met, I felt it. Love so overwhelming, so pure, it silenced every question I'd ever had. He didn't just look at me. He saw me. Every thought I'd ever had, every fear I'd wrestled with, every silent prayer I'd whispered into the dark. He knew it all, and still there was only compassion in his gaze. I wanted to ask where I was, what was happening, but before I could say a word, he smiled and said, "You're home, home." And suddenly, I understood. I wasn't lost anymore, I wasn't broken, I wasn't forgetting. I was found, whole, and more alive than I had ever been. All the pain, all the confusion, it was gone, and in its place was peace. Real peace. My life unfolded before me, not in fragments or flashes, but like a living story. Every moment, every choice, every thought, clear and unfiltered. It wasn't rushed. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was simply there, watching my life as it truly was. At first, I saw beauty. I saw the times I showed up for people, the quiet ways I offered comfort, the prayers I whispered in faith, the songs I sang with everything in me. I saw love, real love, between me and the people I'd held closest, my children, my grandchildren, friends who had walked with me through joy and sorrow. And for a moment, I felt peace. Maybe I had done okay. Maybe my life had been enough. But then the view shifted. I saw moments I'd forgotten or chosen to forget. Times I looked away when someone needed help, too wrapped up in my own world. Times I judged someone silently, not out loud, but in my heart. I saw small opportunities to love that I'd let slip by, and I saw how often I'd clung to pride instead of choosing grace. Then I watched myself giving, week after week, year after year, placing my tithe in the offering plate, 10%, always 10%. I had never missed it. Even in the leanest seasons, I stayed committed. I had believed that made me faithful. But now, standing in this place of truth, I saw it for what it really was. I hadn't been giving out of love. I had been giving out of obligation. I had turned tithing into a rule to follow, a transaction I believed would secure blessings in return. In my mind, I thought I was being obedient. In my heart, I was checking off a box. I never asked God what He truly desired from me. I never invited Him into that space. And yet, Jesus didn't look away. His eyes never flinched. There was no anger in Him, only a deep sorrow. Not disappointment in me, but sadness for what I had missed. Then He spoke. "Do you understand why you're here?" His voice wasn't sharp. It was kind, yet steady. The kind of voice that doesn't force answers, but patiently waits for them. And the truth, I didn't understand. I had lived my life thinking I was doing everything right. I went to church, followed the teachings, gave what I was taught to give. But, standing there, I realized something I had never seen before. I gave faithfully, but not freely. I followed the rules, but never asked for the heart behind them. Tithing had never been about money. It had always been about surrender, about trusting God, not just with my income, but with all of me, my heart, my motives, my willingness to let go. Jesus let me feel that, let it sink in, because what He was about to show me next, that would change everything. As I stood before Jesus, my heart filled with expectation. I had spent my life trying to be faithful, especially in my giving. I tithed every Sunday without fail. I gave even when it was hard. I sacrificed, I obeyed. Part of me waited for affirmation, for Him to say, "Well done." Surely He would acknowledge my commitment. Surely He would be pleased. But that moment didn't come. Instead, Jesus looked at me with eyes that held no anger, no rejection, but something even more powerful: sorrow. A deep, quiet sorrow that cut through me more than any rebuke ever could. And then He showed me why. Scenes from my life began to play before us. Not just memories, but truths. I saw myself giving, week after week, placing envelopes into the offering basket, writing checks, making donations, giving even when money was tight. And for a while I felt proud. I had done what was right. But then something shifted. Jesus wasn't showing me what I gave, He was showing me why I gave. I saw myself sitting in church, listening to sermons that promised blessing for obedience. I remembered the unease in my heart, the subtle fear that if I didn't give, I'd fall out of God's favor. I saw the times I forced myself to give out of obligation, not because I felt led by love, but because I was afraid. Afraid of being disobedient, afraid of lacking, afraid that without that 10%, I was no longer safe in God's eyes. And then the truth surfaced, quietly, unmistakably. I hadn't been giving out of joy. I had been giving out of fear. I had treated tithing like a transaction, a spiritual trade. I give this, God gives that. Somewhere along the way, I stopped offering from the heart and started paying from a sense of duty. I believed I was securing blessings, protection, favor. I thought I was proving my faithfulness, but I wasn't offering love. I was placing an order. Then Jesus turned to me, his eyes full of grace, but firm with truth. "You have misunderstood," he said. His voice didn't shame me, but it shattered something inside me. I had built my giving around a number, a habit, a rule. But Jesus was showing me that giving was never about the money. It was about trust. It was about surrender. "You have been generous with your offerings," he continued, "but you have withheld yourself." Tears welled up in my eyes. I had thought tithing was proof of my faith, but now I saw clearly. Faith wasn't measured in percentages. Faith was measured in surrender, in where I placed my trust, in whether my heart was open or guarded. And for too long, I had trusted the act of giving more than I had trusted God himself. I believed my obedience would earn blessings, but I had forgotten that God's love had never been for sale. It had always been a gift. The truth stung, but it also set me free. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't have to give to earn God's favor. I gave because I had it. I didn't need to fear losing his love. I was already held by it. Jesus wasn't interested in my money. He wanted me. And in that moment, I understood. Real giving flows from love, not fear. From freedom, not guilt. From trust, not transaction. And that changed everything. I looked at him, my voice trembling. "Lord, what do you want from me?" Jesus didn't answer right away. He just smiled, a smile so full of peace it washed over me like warm light after a long storm. And then, with a voice that felt like both comfort and conviction, he said, "I don't want what's in your hands. I want what's in your heart." The words landed deep, deeper than anything I had ever heard from a pulpit or read in a devotional. Because in that moment, I finally understood. It was never about the money. It was never about checking a box or meeting a quota. It was about surrender, about trust, about love. I had spent my life giving by the percentage, 10% like I was taught. I measured my faith by obedience to the rule. But God, he had always wanted something much greater, not just my resources, but my heart. And then everything changed. Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly the vision around us shifted. My life continued to unfold, but now the focus wasn't the church pews or the offering baskets. He began to show me something I had never bothered to truly see. People. So many people. I saw faces in crowds, in stores, on sidewalks, carrying invisible burdens. Some were weighed down by grief, others by loneliness. Some looked fine on the outside, but inside they were unraveling. And I saw myself, walking right past them. Not because I didn't care, but because I thought I had already done enough. I had given at church. I had done my Christian duty. That was supposed to be enough, right? Then I saw specific moments. Painful, clear, undeniable. A woman in church, someone I had sat beside for years, was holding back tears one Sunday. I hadn't noticed. I was too focused on sealing my tithe envelope, too eager to mark my faithfulness. I never asked if she was okay. A man outside a grocery store, worn clothes, tired eyes, trembling hands, looked up as I passed. He didn't ask for money. He just wanted to be seen. I looked away, told myself I gave to the church. That was enough. A young mother at a gas station juggling two kids, visibly overwhelmed as she realized she didn't have enough to pay. I had watched from a distance, then drove off, comforted by the thought that I was doing my part through the church. And then Jesus spoke again. "You have given to the church," he said gently, "but you have withheld from my people." It hit me like a wave. I had followed the rule, yes, but I had missed the heart. Tithing was never supposed to be the end of generosity. It was meant to be the beginning. It was never just about giving money. It was about becoming a vessel of love, of kindness, of compassion. I had been faithful with my finances, but I had withheld my time, my attention, my humanity. I had assumed that giving money meant I was living generously, but generosity without connection is incomplete. God hadn't called me to fund a ministry. He had called me to be the ministry, not just to give to the church, but to give through it, to reach the people right in front of me. And standing there, face to face with Jesus, I saw it clearly for the first time. It was never about the offering plate. It was always about the people. Jesus lifted his hand once more, and what I saw next broke something inside me. I was shown people from my own church, not strangers, not distant faces. These were people I'd worshipped beside week after week. Some were quietly struggling, carrying burdens they were too ashamed to speak of. I saw parents who had given their last dollars to the offering plate, hoping it would unlock a miracle, while their children went to bed hungry. I saw single mothers, elderly couples, young families, all holding on to the belief that if they just gave enough, God would have to bless them in return. But the miracle never came. I saw the confusion in their eyes, the silent cries in their hearts. Had God forgotten them? Had they done something wrong? Had they not given enough? Tears ran down my face, because I saw it now, clearer than I ever had before. This was never God's heart. He never asked for people to give out of fear. He never wanted anyone to feel like his love was a reward that could be bought or earned. It was never about percentages. It was always about presence, about love, about trust. Jesus turned to me, sorrow etched in every word. But so was something even deeper, compassion. "My child," he said, "true giving is not about what you place in the offering plate. It's about what you offer of yourself." I broke, because I finally understood. All those years, I had limited generosity to numbers. I believed that if I tithed faithfully, I was doing my part. But God had been calling me to something so much more than money. He had been asking for me, my time, my voice, my heart, my compassion. People didn't need my checkbook. They needed my presence. They needed someone to sit beside them, to ask if they were okay, to listen, to care. And I hadn't been there. I had been so focused on doing the right thing that I missed the real thing. Then Jesus placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "It's not too late to understand," he said softly. "That's why I brought you here." In that moment, my heart was a strange mix of sorrow and peace. I mourned the years I had missed, but I felt the grace that still surrounded me. I had been blind, but now I was beginning to see. I had once believed that my tithe was my greatest offering, but now I knew love is the greatest gift I could ever give. Then, with a quiet motion, Jesus lifted his hand again, and everything around me began to shift. The memories, the regrets, the missed chances, all faded. And suddenly, I was standing in a place beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. The light pulsed with joy. The air itself seemed to hum with peace. I wasn't just in this place, I was part of it, and everywhere I looked, there were people, smiling, radiant, whole. There was no pain, no comparison. no burden of not being enough. What moved me most was how they gave, not out of duty, not from obligation, but simply because love overflowed. They gave of themselves freely, joyfully, completely, without hesitation or fear, without worrying if there would be enough left for them. And in that moment, I understood what heaven was made of. Not gold, not perfection, but people, fully alive in love, giving themselves away, because that's what they were created for. And so was I. I stood in awe, watching as people embraced one another, not out of duty, but from pure, unfiltered love. They gave without hesitation, time, care, compassion, sharing freely with no thought of keeping score. There was no fear of loss because they knew nothing given in love is ever truly lost. And in that moment, something clicked in my spirit. This was what giving was always meant to be. It had never been about income percentages, carefully calculated offerings, or trying to earn a blessing. It was never about checking a box. God never designed giving to be a formula. It was always meant to be a reflection of the heart, a life poured out, a life surrendered. Jesus stood beside me, quiet, kind, eyes full of love as I tried to take it all in. His voice was gentle, but it carried the weight of eternity. "This," he said, "is what I desire for all my children." Tears burned in my eyes. These people I saw, full of peace, joy, and unity, they hadn't arrived here because of flawless rule-keeping or perfect tithing records. They were here because they had lived with open hands and open hearts. They had trusted completely. They had given themselves fully. Not just their money, but their love, their time, their presence. And they had done it without fear. That's when it hit me. I had spent so much of my life believing that my giving proved my devotion, that the discipline of tithing was what pleased God most. But God didn't want a transaction. He wanted me, all of me, my trust, my willingness to love without limits. I turned to Jesus, my voice barely a whisper. "Lord," I didn't know. He smiled, eyes filled with understanding. "You know now, and that's why I brought you here." I looked once more at the people, living freely, loving fully, lacking nothing. They had surrendered everything and gained more than I ever thought possible. And then I felt it deep inside me, that this wasn't the end. Jesus had more to show me, more to teach me, because the journey of the heart was just beginning. The beauty of heaven faded, and suddenly everything around me changed. The warmth, the joy, the overwhelming light. It was gone. In its place, a stillness settled over me, heavy and quiet. It wasn't frightening, it was something deeper. A sorrow I couldn't quite explain, as if the very air carried the weight of things left undone. Around me stood people, not in torment, not in chaos, but in silence. They looked tired, worn down, not by pain, but by regret. Their eyes carried a heaviness, not from punishment, but from realization. Some stood alone, lost in thought. Others reached out as if searching for something that was just out of reach, only to grasp at emptiness. This wasn't a place of anger. It was a place of aching clarity. I saw people who had done all the right things. They had followed the rules, kept the rituals, gone to church every Sunday. But somewhere along the way, they had missed the point. They had checked the boxes, but their hearts had remained closed. I saw versions of myself among them, those who gave faithfully, but never fully understood what God had truly asked for. Jesus stood beside me again. His presence was steady, his voice soft but unmistakably strong. "It's not about what you give," he said. "It's about how you live." The words pierced through me, revealing things I hadn't dared confront. I had tithed. I had served. I had done what I thought was expected. But had I really lived for God? Had I trusted Him with everything? Had I surrendered not just my money, but my motives, my time, my heart? I turned to Him, my voice low, aching. Lord, have I missed it? His eyes met mine. There was no judgment, no anger, only love, so full, so patient it took my breath away. You've been given another chance, He said. And with those words, something shifted inside me. Faith was never about performance. It was never about meeting a quota or earning approval. It was about love, deep, real, life-giving love, the kind that pours itself out not just through giving, but through how we live every single day. The darkness began to fade, and I felt it. This was just the beginning. There He was, Jesus, standing before me once again. His presence wrapped around me like a blanket of peace, of love, of something deeper than words could ever describe. It felt like home. And yet, I still felt the weight of what I had just seen. The missed moments, the misunderstandings, the years I had followed the rules but missed the heartbeat of God's love. My voice trembled as I looked at Him, vulnerable and wide open. Lord, what happens now? He looked at me with eyes that held galaxies of compassion. His voice was gentle yet full of authority. You've been given another chance, He said. Those words didn't just comfort me, they changed me. I understood now I wasn't meant to stay here. I had been brought to this place not as a destination, but as a turning point, a revelation, a second beginning, and now it was my choice. Jesus lifted His hand, and before me appeared two paths. One led deeper into that place of eternal light, a place where pain no longer existed, where peace reigned, where I would be fully with Him forever. The other led back, to the world I had left behind, a world still full of pain, of searching, of people longing for a truth they hadn't yet seen. I knew what staying meant, eternal peace, but I also knew what leaving meant, purpose. If I stayed, who would tell them? Who would tell the ones still sitting in church every week, believing they were doing enough, yet feeling empty inside? Who would reach the people giving out of fear instead of love? Who would tell them that God never asked for perfection, only surrender? That He wasn't measuring their worth in percentages or performance, but in the posture of their hearts? In that moment, the decision became clear. I dropped to my knees before Jesus, my whole being overwhelmed. Lord, I whispered, I choose You, not just here, but in the life You're sending me back to. He placed His hand on my shoulder. His touch was firm, grounding me in a love I would never forget. Then He smiled. Go, He said, and tell them. And in a flash, the light exploded around me, so bright I couldn't see, couldn't think, couldn't feel anything but the warmth of that divine love. Then, air. I gasped. Suddenly I was back. My body felt heavy, worn, familiar. I heard the beeping of machines, voices calling my name. I was in a hospital. Hands gripped mine. Tears fell on my cheeks. My daughter's voice cracked. Mum, you're here. I couldn't speak yet. My throat was dry, my limbs weak. But inside, I had never felt stronger. The doctors called it a miracle, said I shouldn't have made it. But I knew the truth. The miracle wasn't that I came back. The miracle was why. Lying there, I could still feel Him, still hear His voice. Go and tell them. But how? How could I possibly describe something so massive, so sacred? For days, I struggled to find the words. Everything I tried to write down felt small, incomplete. How do you explain the love that rebuilt your soul? And then I remembered. He didn't tell me to explain it perfectly. He just told me to tell them. So I started with the people closest to me, with my family. I began with my family. When I finally had the strength, I told them everything, from the moment I closed my eyes in that chair to the moment I stood face to face with Jesus. I spoke of the life I saw replayed before me, not as a highlight reel, but as a revealing of the heart. I told them how I'd spent years giving out of habit, out of duty, without truly understanding the love behind the act. I spoke of the people I had passed by, the needs I had ignored, the truth I had overlooked. At first they listened in silence. Some of them wept. My daughter clutched my hand and whispered, "Mum, I believe you." But others weren't so sure. I saw it in their eyes, the questions, the doubts, the way they exchanged glances, silently asking, could this really be true? "It might have been a dream," my son said gently, not wanting to hurt me. "You've been through so much. Maybe it was just your mind trying to make sense of everything." I understood. It's easier to explain something away than to believe something so otherworldly, so personal. But I knew what I had experienced. And more importantly, I knew I'd been sent back with a purpose. If I stayed silent, I'd be disobeying the very one who gave me another chance. So I kept speaking. When I was strong enough, I stood before my church, the same church where I had worshipped for decades, and I shared my story. I told them everything about the journey, the two paths, the revelation that changed me. I told them how I had spent most of my life believing that giving 10% of my income meant I was honoring God. But God wasn't counting dollars. He was reading hearts. I told them that I had given money, but I hadn't given me. Not fully. I had been generous with my wallet, but stingy with my time, my compassion, my attention. I reminded them that God doesn't measure our faithfulness by formulas, but by surrender. I spoke about the people I had seen in heaven, those who gave freely, joyfully, because love overflowed from within them. And I spoke of the others too, the ones who had done everything right, but still carried regret because they had missed the heart of it all. Then I told them what Jesus told me. It's not about what you give, it's about how you live. Some wept openly. Others sat in silence, processing, and yes, there were a few who questioned everything. I heard the whispers. It's just a near-death dream. That's not how we were taught. Tithing is biblical. This feels different. But I didn't speak to convince. I spoke to obey. And the more I shared, the more I noticed something incredible. People started changing. Some gave differently. Not just with money, but with kindness, time, forgiveness. They stopped giving out of fear and started giving from a place of faith. Others laid down the guilt they had carried for years, the belief that they could never do enough to earn God's blessing. I saw hearts being set free, and that's when it hit me. This was why Jesus had sent me back. Not to rewrite scripture, not to create confusion, but to open eyes, to soften hearts, to remind people of the kind of giving that reflects the very heart of God. The real message wasn't about changing a rule. It was about rediscovering why we give at all. I realized I didn't need everyone to believe me. I didn't need to defend what I had seen. I just needed to keep telling the truth, because somewhere, someone needed to hear it. As I kept sharing, something inside me shifted. The pressure I had once felt to measure up, to earn God's approval through tithing, began to fall away. I finally understood God never needed my money. He wanted me. He wanted my trust, my surrender, my love, freely given, not calculated or coerced. That's what true generosity looks like. It's not about numbers. It's about the willingness to live open-handed, open-hearted, fully dependent on His grace. I remembered the faces in heaven, those who gave without expecting anything in return, who lived with open hands, not just open wallets. And I remembered the others, the ones who followed the rules but missed the reason. Jesus showed me both, and then He gave me a choice. I could go back to living by the rules, checking boxes, giving what was required, or I could live differently. I could give myself, fully, joyfully, without fear, not just writing checks, but writing love into the lives of others. Not just giving because I had to, but giving because I wanted to. Not just following instructions, but following Jesus. And that, I believe, is the choice we all face. Will we give out of love or out of obligation? Will we live lives that reflect God's heart or lives that perform for His approval? Because here's the truth. Jesus isn't asking for more offerings. He's asking for your heart. He's calling us to something deeper, a life of trust, of surrender, of love that gives freely, because it knows that God will always provide. That's the kind of faith that pleases Him. That's the kind of generosity that reflects His love to the world. That's what I was sent back to tell you. So now the question is, will you listen? If this message speaks to your heart, like, share, and subscribe, because someone else may need this just as much as you did. I'm not the same person I was before. I was given a second chance, not just to live, but to truly live. To tell you this, God is after your heart, not your habits. He doesn't want your performance, He wants your surrender. And if you're still breathing, that means you have a chance too. This message isn't just my story, it could be yours. Maybe you've been giving, serving, showing up, but still feeling empty. Maybe you've wondered if you're doing enough, if God really sees you. Let me tell you, He does. And He's calling you deeper. If something stirred in your spirit while watching this, don't keep it to yourself. Comment below. I want to hear your story. Like this video if it touched you. Share it with someone who needs this reminder. And hit that subscribe button so you never miss a message that could shift your entire perspective. This isn't just content, it's a calling. And I believe that if you're watching this, it's not by accident. May God bless you richly, fill you with peace, and lead you into the kind of faith that changes everything. I'll keep speaking, you keep listening, and together we'll walk this path of truth.